picked up a Mazda factory part from Mazda Japan through Right Hand Drive Japan. I don't know what the scare was with all the tariffs and whatnot, but it still was probably a good $40 cheaper to get through Japan than it was to get through even Ray Crow here in the States. So prices are still down. I think it's probably the dollar to yen value. I was still able to get a Mazda factory part. I didn't want to go aftermarket with this. Exedy makes a good master cylinder, but I could not find an Exedy slave in stock, so I just sprung for the Mazda one, and hopefully it lasts another 30 years. I'll probably keep the factory one and rebuild it and keep it on the shelf as a spare. But this is what the slave looks like. See if it'll focus on there. So there's a hard line that goes into here. You're going to want to use a flare nut wrench to get that, to loosen that. There's a few different ways you can replace these. I use the flare nut wrench to take the hard line off. You can take you can keep the hard line attached and pull it off through the soft line on the top of the transmission, but it's pretty accessible right there. You'll see when I show you the video. It's right above the starter. It's not too bad. There's these two bolt holes. There you have they're 12 or 14 millimeters. I believe they're 12, but we'll find out here in a minute. This is the bleeder here. After you get everything hooked up, you crack the bleeder and bleed the air out. This is the rod that you want to make sure is in the indentation on the clutch fork. So when you install this into the transmission, you want to make sure that goes in the indentation of the clutch fork and then bolt it in, because if that goes and it's sticking up and you bolt that in, you go push in the clutch, it'll actually blow this rod out and then it'll fall down in your transmission. And if you get a magnet, I've had people say they were able to fish them out, but worst case, you'll have to pull the transmission out to retrieve that rod if you can't get it through the access panel. But that's one kind of gotcha, is you make sure that goes in the divot of the clutch fork. But that's what it looks like. Nice brand new Mazda unit. Let's hope this lasts another 30 years for me. So if you're not familiar with the slave cylinder on a FD or even Turbo 2 RX7, it's very similar. This is where it's located, just above the starter. It's not too bad to get to. You got two 12 millimeter bolts, one on the top, one on the bottom to pull it off. You have that 10 millimeter hard line going in. I'm probably going to just loosen that to pull it off, and then the bleeder on the back right there. So I'm going to put a pan underneath, break the two bolts that are holding it onto the transmission loose, just make sure they're loose, and then I'm going to take off the top hard line and put a pan underneath it and just let it drip. It shouldn't drip too much. It should be a pretty quick change. That way I can get the other one slapped in real quick and bled. I shouldn't lose too much fluid, but I typically let them gravity bleed. Just don't let the master run dry, because then you're going to have to bleed your whole system. If you work quick, it's a pretty quick change. You could just drop it out, slap the new one in, finger tighten those two bolts holding it in. Make sure you line it up to the fork. Otherwise, you know, if you step on the clutch, it'll just blow it into the transmission. I'm not going to be able to film this while I do it, just because the car's not very far off the ground. I'm not on a lift, so I got no good way to hold the camera. But here's what I use. It's just a wobbly socket. It ends up being a 12 millimeter. You can see it goes on that bottom bolt. It's easy to get the top bolt too. That's the access panel I mentioned on the transmission, to where if you do blow that rod off, if you're lucky, it'll kind of roll down to the bottom and you can get a magnet and kind of pull it out. Another thing to note, I already have the battery pulled out just from doing some other work. You can disconnect the battery if you're clumsy, because if you touch the post that's underneath that rubber grommet, you can arc it out. If you have the ratchet touching something ground like it is right now, it's touching the transmission, or you know, even the body of the starter, so you can actually cause some damage, or you know, weld your extension to something. It's always good to unhook the battery if you're working near your starter, especially if you got a wedding ring or something on. I've had people I've worked with arc their wedding ring to something if they touch that hot spot on the starter. If you got bigger hands, you can resort to pulling off the hard line there where it reaches the soft line, or even pull it off at the top where the soft line disconnects, and then pull this C-clip out to remove the whole unit and do everything at once. So whatever's easiest for you. With me, I got small hands, so I can usually work in smaller spaces. If you got bigger hands, it might be kind of hard to do the hard line on top of the slave cylinder. You need a kind of small flare nut wrench to reach up there too, because you only get to turn it like, you know, 1/8 of a turn at a time. So if you don't have little hands like me and you prefer to work you know, in bigger spaces, you can take it off here or even above. It's really your choice. With me, it's just easy enough to pull it off the hard line on the bottom, but you do have options. When you get everything bolted up, all the lines connected, crack the bleeder, gravity bleed it until you get a nice steady drip like this. You know, you don't have any air in the system. 99% of the time, this will be good enough to bleed the system. Close up the bleeder and then go test out your clutch. And make sure you got good disengagement. If not, try to bleed it, pressure bleed it, or use a vacuum bleeder, but this seems to work for me pretty much all the time unless you opened up some other part of the system. But gravity bleeding works pretty good for these. There's not much else you need to do. Alright, so we got the clutch slave cylinder done. I'll give it a test drive. Goes into all gears good. Good feel with the pedal. Take a test drive.